This is Radio Today broadcasting in Johannesburg on 1485 AM and nationally on DSTV audio channel 869.
Conversations with Niki is brought to you by studyapps.co.za, South Africa's leading education app for tablets. Welcome, welcome. Conversations with Niki it is. This is Niki Seberini, and I'm delighted to be with you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Would like to welcome our syndication partner listeners here in Joburg, Eldo's FM and Chai FM, Kawi FM, all the way down in Port Alfred, West Coast FM in Namibia, 90.3 MC in Plet, Knysna FM, Wild Coast FM in East London, and Bay FM in PE. Welcome, welcome. So you know that every week we podcast the conversations that we have. So if there are any conversations in the past that you've missed out on, or if perhaps you have to leave the conversation for a short while, you can always visit the website Conversations with Niki, one word, and Niki spelled Niki, conversationswithniki.co.za, and all the podcasts are posted, and they are posted just a day after the show. So you'll be able to get the podcast of this show by tomorrow. Also, I'd love your input. I mean, are you enjoying the conversations that we're having? Sometimes we speak to people who have overcome many things and perhaps will inspire you. Other times it's people who have done extraordinary things and also perhaps given you an idea of something to do. Or maybe it's a cause that we like to focus on, and really just to give you an idea and a sense of the kind of contributions that you can make as an individual. Now, if you have a story, if you have an idea and you would like to listen to that kind of story on Conversations with Niki, then again, go to that website and just contact me. I'll make contact with you, and if we can turn it into a good show, well, then I'm very happy to do that. Now, today's show is, well, it's about something that a lot of us held very close to our hearts for a very long time, because the 22nd of December was World Rhino Day. Now, the question is, what does that mean to you? Is this a cause that you're passionate about? Are you doing your very best to fight against the brutal slaughtering of our wildlife? Is this a cause that perhaps sits at the bottom of your list, and you'd rather spend more of your time and energy helping other organizations? Or do you read the next blaring headline of yet another rhino being slaughtered without much feeling because, well, you've become desensitized? And maybe you just feel helpless, and maybe you have resigned yourself to the fact that there's nothing you can do. In 2008, 83 rhinos were killed for their horns. Now it's September 2013, and already 688 rhinos have been slaughtered. And many celebrities, many politicians, forward thinkers, people like you and me have put time and energy into fighting against this terrible epidemic. And so many organizations have formed, and existing organizations have focused on fighting against rhino poaching. We've got Stop Rhino Poaching. We've got the WWF International in South Africa. We've got the EWT, the Endangered Wildlife Trust, the International Rhino Foundation, the Rhino Resource Center, SOS Rhino Borneo, Save the Rhino, Borneo Rhino Alliance, the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, Asian Rhino Project, Sandparks Poaching Forum, Animal Parts and Chinese Medicine, and so many more. And yet, we are not doing anything. Nothing is helping to stop this ever-increasing number of rhinos that are being slaughtered. Now, today's show is not about how we're going to beat the system, or catch the poachers, or try to convince the Chinese and Vietnamese that, in fact, rhino horn has no medicinal qualities whatsoever. The show today is about peeling away the thick skin that we've grown. It's about becoming raw once again and connecting to a cause that's very important to each and every South African. Because if we don't stand up against this, and if we don't stand up united, then we have to ask the question, what will be next? We're going to be talking about the power of social media in fighting this battle. We're going to hear stories from people who do extraordinary things each and every day that we are not even aware of. So last week there was this global Twitter storm, and I don't know if you are a regular tweeter, and if you are, well, then you'll know what I'm talking about. And it all had to do with saving our rhinos. the WWF South Africa teamed up with Flow Communications to create a conservation campaign, I Am for Rhinos, using social media, specifically Twitter, and it dominated. I have the CEO of Flow Communications, Tara Turkingon, here in the studio to tell us a little bit more about this campaign and how successful or unsuccessful it was. Tara, thank you so much for coming into the studio.
Thanks for having me, Niki. It's great to be here.
Now, I was fascinated because I just saw the tweets going at 100 miles an hour. But for those people who aren't on Twitter, or maybe they are and they didn't know about it, tell us a little bit more about this campaign.
Okay, so what we tried to do was it was an awareness campaign. It was just a campaign where we didn't ask for anything. We didn't ask for money. We just asked people to lend their voice to saying that rhino poaching is not okay and that we are going to stop it. By first of all commenting on it, and then by standing together and getting others to stand together, very powerful people around the world to stand together, and raising global awareness about this issue. We in South Africa are very clued up about rhino poaching. We, like you say, we see it every day in the newspapers, but it's not an issue that's top of mind all around the world. So what we were trying to do was get the passion that we knew that South Africans had, and get them to start talking about it in a way that would force the rest of the world to start talking about it. On Twitter, conversations are defined by hashtags. So you put a little hashtag sign in front of your conversation, and we define this hashtag, I am for the number 4 rhinos, which is basically a little personal pledge. It's saying, it's making a personal statement, I am for rhinos, I'm going to stand up against this. And just by getting literally thousands and thousands of people to do it, to start to influence some people who are major social influencers. You and I maybe aren't the hugest social influencers in the world, but when you get people like Stephen Fry, Lennox
he's got how many followers? Over 2 million?
Over 6 million
Is it
followers.
6 million?
Yeah.
Wow, incredible.
Lennox Lewis was so incredible. I mean, I was never a fan of boxing, but now I'm Lennox Lewis's biggest fan. I mean, he said, he just out of generosity, he said, anyone who tweets me with I'm for rhinos hashtag in the next 30 minutes, I'll answer any question you have. And obviously
amazing.
Twitter just went berserk. In fact, he had to come back. He said, I can't answer all your questions now.
I love that.
So that's the idea, was to get South Africans to use our passion to push this global conversation, which happened remarkably well. I mean, we ended up having contributions from over 50,000 individual people. We had contributions from 103 different countries. It trended for 6 days in South Africa.
Superb.
In the top, often at number 1, and it actually trended at number 1 in the world on Saturday, and again it trended worldwide on Sunday. So, and just so people understand, I mean, Twitter is obviously an incredible platform for this sort of thing, and I think we really have realized the power of Twitter through doing this campaign. But South Africa is a small population. We're a small Twitter population. So for a South African campaign to dominate
globally,
global trends, as you know, it was a very busy news weekend as well, especially from Africa with the Kenyan disaster as well. So for it to be at number 1 in the world is actually something quite exceptional, I think.
Well, what I like is you took it from a South African talking point to a global talking point. And for those people who never knew that we had a problem with rhinos being poached, because I read an article about a woman in China who says, there's this misconception that people in China think that you breeding rhinos like you would breed chickens and cows. So it's to have a global discussion.
Exactly.
I think is so important.
Exactly.
We're going to come back to this campaign because the lady that I'm about to talk to is very difficult to get hold of. She has dedicated over 25 years of her life to rehabilitating, to helping wildlife, and she's out in the Waterberg at the moment, and she's busy rehabilitating a little prem rhino. This is a woman that we all have to look up to because she has rehabilitated, I think, over 200 rhinos so far.
Wow.
So we're very excited to have her because, as I said,
Fantastic.
it's the stories that are important. So we're going to take a quick break from Twitter and introduce and welcome Karen to the show. Karen, thank you very, very much for making yourself available.
Lovely to chat to you, and we're actually not in the Waterberg. We've just moved down for overnight to the Onderstepoort veterinary faculty.
Okay.
Our little calf developed very severe diarrhea that we were very concerned about, so we had a rush down to the veterinary faculty, and we're now nursing her at Onderstepoort.
How's she doing?
Stable. She's a lot better than she was when we arrived last night. She had a very uncomfortable, very painful night with a lot of diarrhea, and But today she's got a lot of attitude and she's feeling a lot more comfortable. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we're on the way.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Good, Karen. Well, as I said, Karen, I started off the show saying, are we becoming desensitized? And is the South African public fatigued when it comes to seeing these images of rhinos, the rhinos without their horns and the numbers escalating all the time and the sense of helplessness? And that's why I think it's so important to hear the stories of people who every single day are working so hard at fixing this problem, or at least slowing it down, because it just seems to be picking up momentum all the time. So, Karen, let me ask you this. 25 years you've been doing this, but what made you focus on the rehabilitation and specifically rhinos?
Clive Walker sent us a number of years ago a tiny little prematurely born black rhino calf. Mm-hmm. And I'd never done rhino and I'd never done a prem baby. And I think they'd written it off and decided, well, let's just send it anyway. And I think in spite of rather than because of, the little calf survived, and it just opened an absolute floodgate of rhino. So I was incredibly privileged over the years to be able to learn and to have, the opportunity to work on hundreds. So when the poaching situation started and we got calls to say, their calves being orphaned, I had to come back in and get involved. And unfortunately, the calves are flooding in. There are a lot that are being orphaned. But I think you mentioned quite an important point, and that is I think people are fatigued with hearing all the bad news. And just sitting at Ornstepoort working on this little calf, hearing of some of the amazing things that are going on. The veterinary fraternity, the rescue fraternity, all of us were caught on the back foot on this one because none of us expected the crisis to escalate the way it did. And it's presenting us with challenges that we hadn't anticipated or experienced previously. Severely traumatized calves with PTSD, that's post-traumatic stress disorder, rhino that are being defaced where the entire face is taken off a live rhino. How do you handle that from a veterinary point of view? And it sounds horrific, but the spirit behind it, the incredible successes and the things that are coming out of it are phenomenal. And I must admit, when I hear your Twitter thing, I got hooked up in that as well. In between feeding rhino, I had my finger on the button thinking, I've just got to do another one and another one.
Oh, awesome.
So congrats to the guy who did that, the guys who did that project. It was phenomenal.
Well, Tara, who's sitting here opposite me in the studio, this is her brainchild.
Huge rhino hugs to her.
Thank you, back at you. It was the WWF as well, already.
So Karen, you talk about going to Ornstepoort and hearing the good stories, but when you are behind the scenes and you are seeing rhinos being defaced while they're still alive, and you have to face this, how do you stay focused? How do you wake up every day and think, okay, even if I just help this prem calf, it'll be okay? How do you keep yourself going?
I think you've just hit it. We take it one calf or one casualty at a time. It's the only way you really can cope in a crisis. You focus on what you can do right there and then. And I think that by being directly involved, by being focused, by, being so drawn up into it, it does take away that sense of helplessness, because within that really lousy situation, and we are at war, and we're fighting a war with civilian rules against a foe that is far bigger than we can ever imagine in terms of global syndicated crime. But there are so many tiny good steps, and by just focusing on one good step forward. And I think there's so much of the sadness in the media, but behind the scenes there is amazing stuff going on. And I know that we have sponsors say to us, nothing's working. Why should we carry on sponsoring anti-poaching or orphaned calves? Or, what are we wasting our money on? It's not working. My answer to them is just think how much worse it would be if they didn't have that involvement. And I think that, unfortunately, because of the security issue, we don't hear of all the incredible investigations and successes that are being done. We don't hear about the guys who are on the front line whose lives are being threatened every single day. We can't expose who they are or what they're doing for security reasons, but my goodness, they are out there and they're doing a phenomenal job. So more rhino hugs going out to them.
Absolutely.
We have a little calf waking up next to us and there's positive feedback from them. Those guys are seeing carcasses, their lives in danger. So sure, it must be tough as well.
Karen, tell us about these little calves. I mean, what are they like? I mean, you're dealing with calves calves that are traumatized, that are suffering from this post-traumatic stress disorder. How do you deal with that and play mom to them? I mean, perhaps you've got some stories you'd like to share.
Well, I think the best thing we can do for those little calves, apart from the sort of veterinary side and the nursing side, is to play mom, to give them a quiet, calm environment in which to recover, to give them security, to give them comfort. All of those things contribute to giving them that sense of recovery. So we really go out of our way to make sure that they come into places where it's quiet, where it's calm, where their injuries can be treated properly, where they can get proper pain medication. And then we really bunny hug. We give them soft blankets and warm things and good food. And all of those things help to reduce the stress. Having them with other rhinos, we have, groups of little ages, of the same ages together. Being with other rhinos helps. But there's no doubt that the little ones we're working with are so traumatized, and they really need, special handling, special care. And they're very demanding, needy little rhinos with their own personalities. They have senses of humor, which people don't realize. They can be quite naughty. They can be quite appealing. And I think if people who, are involved in the poaching realize that these are not just big, grey, prehistoric beasts, they actually have personalities, they actually feel incredible trauma and distress, they might see it slightly differently.
I mean, I was reading up. I know that rhinos are actually shy creatures, but I didn't know that they could be stressed so easily, and that there's a chance of them getting some kind of ulcers. I had no idea.
They're incredibly stoic. So when you look at them, you think, they're not really stressed and there isn't a problem. But on post-mortem or on symptoms and, doing gastroscopes, they develop the most horrific, one of the stress-related symptoms is ulcers. They get pneumonia, they get behavioral things, they go into depression. And I mean, this all sounds so bunny-hugging, but they very genuinely have all of these challenges brought on by the stress and the trauma. And I think what people don't realize as well is that our entire population of rhinos is at stress. It's not just the rhinos who are being affected by the poaching directly that are stressed. The entire population is under pressure. Things like the presence of anti-poaching units is absolutely critical, but it's very stressful and disturbing as well.
I can imagine, yeah. So, Karen, what happens to these orphaned rhinos that you're able to rehabilitate, and you play mommy for a long period of time, and then they grow and in confidence and all other areas? What happens to them? Are you able to reintroduce them into the wild?
They can very successfully be put back into the wild. Over the years, we've put a number of rhino back in that have gone ahead and bred and had their calves. Because we do it initially and partially from a totally humane point of view, to alleviate the suffering and to give them the comfort. But there's also a very hard line conservation side to it. So we want calves that can go back into the wild. We want calves that can breed and calves that can reproduce and, contribute to conservation and to wild populations.
There are quite a few rehabilitation organizations that are, popping up here and there, and they allow people to go and to visit and to see the little calves. What are your thoughts on that?
That's very, very high risk. The way we found works, and this is through sort of trial and error, is that if you only bond 2 or 3 carers to that calf, ideally you should have one, but it's just not humanly possible to be, the sole carer. So we bond only 2 or 3 people to that little calf so that it only has a close association with a very, very small number of people. We wean at the time that they would naturally be weaned in the wild, and then we start withdrawing human contact. We make sure they spend time with other rhino. And then when they break that bond with you, they break that bond with humans.
I see.
Whereas if they're seeing hundreds of people and it's a pay-and-play situation, we call it, those calves become incredibly tame. They reach sexual maturity and become incredibly dangerous. And also, if you keep them too tame and too humanized, you actually make them a lot more vulnerable to poachers. So
because they wouldn't see poachers as a threat.
They wouldn't see them as a threat. So for us, it's the surrogate mothering that's appropriate and that they need, but on a sort of managed basis, with the primary aim being healthy, self-sustaining, wild rhino that can go back into the wild.
So Karen, for people
what we try and do for our kids, you want your kids to be, independent. You don't want to have to mother them because that's not the right thing. You want them to be independent and to go out and make their way in the world and know that they, are capable of doing that.
Too true. But I'm sure you get attached. I mean, to let them go must be difficult. Once you're bringing the analogy of being a mother and having kids, it must be hard. Karen?
It is, but I think that emotional bond, this little new prem baby we've got, I've been going, 24 hours for the last 8 days with her. And if you don't have that emotional bond and that kind of little bit of maternal instinct with them, that does provide the drive. You know that you actually can't fall asleep, or you know that you can't walk away. So the emotional bond does provide a motivation as well to keep going.
How prem is she?
She's probably a week or two prem, which isn't very prem in terms of being a little rhino because they've got a long pregnancy. But it's enough that she wasn't strong enough to follow mom, that she couldn't walk properly, that she's had kidney and liver problems. But she's doing amazingly well considering, and hopefully this diarrhea that we're now at Onderstepoort for is just a temporary setback.
Well, Karen, just to hear you doing that, and as I said, giving of your time and your energy tirelessly is, well, it's very inspiring. And again, I just think that people who are listening and who maybe are feeling slightly fatigued around this whole topic just need to connect once again. I mean, is there anything that you want to say to people who are listening, who do feel and who are trying to do something and perhaps feel that this war is being lost with the numbers increasing? What do you want to say to them?
We've been told by the sort of crime specialists that it's going to get worse before it gets better, but that the things that are being done at the moment are having an accumulative effect and will suddenly kick in. Okay. And, the way I sort of keep myself going is every time I think, I just want to go and have a sleep or go and watch a movie, and I think, what, these rhino are having a hell of a lot worse time than we are. Suck it up and get on with it. I know it sounds awful, but, that's what keeps me going. I think if they can fight, and we've had calves that have been so brutally attacked and have just come back, healed, recovered, and are just getting on with it. So I think they provide that sort of incentive, just get on with it. If they can cope, we're having a much better time than we are. If they can fight as hard as they are for survival, we can certainly give them the backup that they need to make it. We can't see the species go extinct. We can't lose it.
Karen, thank you. Bless you. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time, and go back to your prem calf, and hopefully we'll be chatting again.
Everybody who's doing good stuff for Rhino and for the media and that, for exposing it and giving a thing that it's needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Go well. Karen Trendler, bye-bye. Conversations with Niki, and if you've just tuned in, welcome. It's great to be with you. It was International Rhino Day or World Rhino Day on the 22nd of September, and there was this fantastic Twitter initiative that took place last week. I am for rhinos, the hashtag. And we're talking about people in South Africa and around the world, and people's responses to what is happening to our rhinos, our heritage, our wildlife. And Karen is just an amazing person, an amazing inspiration. Tara, I mean, this is a person who just dedicates her entire life to these animals, to their well-being.
Incredible person. Wow. Yeah. Gosh.
It is incredible. So let me, you're in communications and you work very closely with WWF here in South Africa to get this campaign together. And we were talking about just how successful this campaign was, and that the important thing was making it not just a South African discussion, but a global discussion. Let me ask you this, the negative news, because it's negative news that sells. I mean, sometimes I'm horrified when I drive and I just look at the headlines on the side of the road and I think we're bombarded with this horrific news all the time, but it seems to sell. That's what people are drawn to. Do you think that's the way to go when it comes to making people aware of the rhino problem? Do you think it is those ugly images that we need to show people? Is it the warm, fuzzy stories? Is it the success stories? How do we get people to connect to this cause and stay with it?
I think it's obviously a mixture. I mean, you don't want to sweep anything under the carpet. Those images are, I mean, that is the reality, and that should be shown. But with I'm for Rhinos, we were trying to do a much more uplifting thing. We were trying to give people a small platform to have a voice to say, I'm for Rhinos, stop poaching. It's not cool. It's not okay. And the overwhelming feeling that we got through the week of the campaign was how hopeful people are and how amazing people are to give of themselves. There were so many self-appointed champions who just went on a mission to get everyone they knew to join in, and many of the celebrities, many of the massive tweeters, the people with millions of followers, they were attracted to the campaign by ordinary people, their fans, fantasy writers, Bollywood stars, sports heroes around the world. Those people were contacted not by WWF directly. Often they were contacted by someone who had them as a hero and said, "Hey, won't you stand up for this?" And that's how they responded. So it is a very hopeful campaign, and I certainly personally feel very uplifted by it and very affirmed by humanity that actually we can save rhinos. Geez, if we can do this, and it actually is not, so incredibly difficult to. Okay, we weren't. It was just an awareness campaign. It was just, it was.
There's no call to action.
We wouldn't.
Besides tweet.
No, and call on others to do it. So we weren't putting our lives in danger like those rangers are. We weren't doing anything too death-defying. But still, I definitely, myself and my colleagues, left with an incredible sense of hope that we can save rhinos. That we are if we are in a position to stand together on Twitter like that, what else are we capable of? We've just got to give people the platform. We've got to figure out how to do it. We've got to talk to the right people, the people who are consuming this horn, which is just a ridiculous, stupid consumption. That is, rhino horn is just keratin. It's just the same stuff as your fingernails or your hair. You might as well grind your own fingernails and chomp them up, and it will give you as much medicinal help. So if we can get that message out around the world, and it does start with us, because we are the people who are passionate, we are the people who stand to lose rhinos, and not only really about rhinos. As wonderful as it is to hear like how I didn't even know rhino has personality or sense of humor, sense of naughtiness, that's amazing. But really, the rhinos are about people as well, and there are countless communities in South Africa that rely on wildlife and wildlife tourism for their livelihood.
Well, it's sustainable.
Tourism, as you know, it's one of the fastest growing industries in the world. In South Africa, we've shown above global growth rates in the past 10 years. It's a massive mainstay for our economy and for poor communities. And if we lose this iconic species, and all the species that are associated with rhinos, the beetles, the birds, everything else, what does it do to impact communities? It's not only about these beautiful animals. It really is about the people that rely on the animals for their livelihood.
You were talking about cool. You used the word cool when you were describing this Twitter campaign. And if you think about social media and you think about just how powerful social media is, think about the Arab Spring. Governments were changed because of social media and this Arab Spring.
Well,
so
that's right. Yeah.
So you talk about this wave of consciousness. Now,
two of the most thrilling tweets I saw in the whole campaign were yesterday afternoon. The DA and the ANC coming out on Twitter, "I'm for rhinos." And to me,
great.
That is so incredible, because then you're actually affecting, political thinking and political change. Ordinary people are not going to change the plight of rhinos. There has to be political will to do it.
And that's the thing about Twitter. So you've got politicians, you've got political parties, you've got the celebrities.
The Zimbabwean environment minister even
exactly.
tweeted.
So everyone is reading, everyone's connecting to just the man on the street who feels passionately about it.
Exactly.
And there's the movement. So what was interesting to me was that in Vietnam or China, for those people who do consume a rhino horn, it's quite a prestigious thing, isn't it? It's very expensive, or it's almost a status symbol. Am I right?
I understand. So look, I'm not an expert.
This is what I heard.
But what I understand from WWF is that the biggest markets are Vietnam, China, Thailand, and it's mostly older, wealthy men who are consuming it. They give it as gifts for. They take it because they believe their sexual prowess is going to be enhanced, or it's going to cure something. It is wealthy people who are consuming this. It's not, and often.
So it's people who could be on Twitter. It's people who could be interacting and using social media,
I hope so.
and associating with brands, all the celebrities, all.
That was the aim. I don't know a lot about it, but one of the interesting things I saw, the Westgate tragedy in Nairobi, they're saying that the terrorists were, it's highly likely they were funded by rhino and elephant poaching, the proceeds of it. So, often rhino poaching, the funds go to organized crime. It's highly organized crime that is doing this to our rhinos.
Well, in a moment, we're going to be talking to someone who also spends a lot of his time trying to prevent the ivory and the rhino horns leaving this country, where the money is to, as you say, fund these terror organizations like Al-Shabaab. So we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to continue, and Warwick will be joining us in a moment, and then we're going to be talking about something that's happening in Cape Town, because there's a wonderful plant life in the Cape that we don't even know about, that is so endangered, and it's closely associated with the rhinoceros as well. So I mean, it's just huge. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Sv Prinsloo, and I'm the HOD of IT integration at Bridwin Preparatory School in Melrose. We started using study apps about 6 months ago and have seen astonishing results. We were quite amazed to see how quickly the kids have been able to use study apps and the benefits it has shown with regards to reinforcing what they've already learned inside the classroom. I would highly recommend study apps for any school.
Studyapps.co.za. Well, welcome back as these conversations with Niki. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Niki Seberini, and I would like to welcome our syndication partner listeners, and that is Bay FM in PE, Wild Coast FM in East London, Knysna FM, 90.3 MC in Plet, West Coast FM in Namibia, Kawi FM Port Alfred, and Chai FM and Eldo's FM here in Joburg. We're talking about rhinos. We're talking about rhino poaching. We're talking about where the money is going to. But most importantly, we're talking about you and me doing something about it, and not growing that thick skin where we become desensitized to the amount of rhinos that are being poached. Because whether you feel passionately about it or not, standing up united against something like this is very important for, as I said earlier, for all South Africans. Because if our rhinos are going to be slaughtered to extinction, then what next? And then what is to become of us as South Africans? So it's a much bigger cause than just the rhinos. Now we have Tara Turkingon, who's in the studio, who was Tara with the WWF South Africa launched this fantastic Twitter campaign, I Am For Rhinos. You wanted 1 million tweets. You got around about 157,000, but you say people are still tweeting. It's going to continue. You will reach it.
It is continuing, yeah. I mean, people can still go and visit the website iamforrhinos.com. It's still continuing. I mean, people are using it as a notice board now. You know, there's a rhino march here, there's this rhino
There we
news.
go. All right.
So we didn't close it down. It's going to continue. Now people are already talking about next year.
You're creating a community, really.
I think we're going to have to carry it on. But yeah, I mean, people can still take part in the conversation. I mean, yesterday Richard Branson's son, tweeted with a picture of a rhino carcass that he saw. He came to South Africa on his honeymoon, and he saw a rhino carcass on the day after his marriage, and he tweeted the picture. So, I mean, it's still pretty relevant. There's still people tweeting like crazy on that hashtag. So please do carry on if you're listening.
Fantastic. Go for it. And you were saying that there was this article, which I came across as well, about Islamic extremists Al-Shabaab receiving large amounts of money through ivory and rhino horn smuggling. The Beeld reported this just yesterday. Apparently up to 40% of Al-Shabaab's money comes from ivory users and buyers, the EIA said. That's the Environmental Investigation Agency. And while the global focus centered mainly on poachers, it was ivory consumers who use ivory for either ornamental or medicinal purposes that financed the group. Very, very scary. So we have all of these horns and we have these ivory tusks that are leaving the country. And the good news is that we have very well trained dogs that are trying their very best to stop that from happening. So I have in the studio to join this conversation Warwick Wragg, who is, are you a dog trainer and a handler, Warwick? How do I describe what you do? Welcome, by the way. Hello.
Thank you for the invitation. A little bit of a jack of all trades. I do everything.
Okay, but I mean, you've worked with dogs for many
Yes.
years. Okay, and at the moment, you're the operations manager for the Bidvest Magnum Explosion Detective Dog Unit. So you screen cargo for explosives, but you also have this dog unit that look for rhino horns, ivory, and what else?
At the moment, sun gazers.
Uh-huh.
We're looking at cycads and also then going into palamon.
Pelomon as well,
Yeah.
huh? So let's look at rhino horn and let's look at ivory and let's look at these dogs that you work with. I mean, how do you possibly train dogs? The dogs that smell out explosives, is it the same kind of training to smell out for rhino horn, for example?
Exactly the same training, no difference. It's just that we imprint them on a certain substance. These dogs that we are using are just on endangered wildlife, not the explosive side. Explosive dogs, we keep to explosives.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
So what kind of dogs are best suited for this job? Because it is their job, isn't it?
It is their job, and
they're employed. It's great.
They're employed. They never ask for sick leave. They don't ask for leave.
Do they ask for a raise?
That neither. They
Okay,
don't.
just better food sometimes.
The food they get is great. They are very, very well looked after because we have to. They work all day, so we have to keep them in peak performance. But generally, the dogs that we're looking for is your German Shepherd, which everybody knows, and then something which is more coming onto the scene now is your Belgian Shepherd, the Malinois.
And how do you, I mean, can all German Shepherds be trained to do this, or is there something that you just see in a pup or a young adult and you know that this particular dog is going to be better at the job?
It comes down to, yes, the individual, definitely, and it doesn't have to be a German Shepherd or a Mallee, as we call them. It can be any breed, but with the German Shepherd and the Mallee, they bred a lot of them for sport and competition, and so it's easier for us to find dogs in that environment. With a lot of people use border collies and that type of thing, but where we work, it's noisy, there's traffic, there's people, and the border collie is sometimes a little bit sensitive to that. But it doesn't mean that we don't use the border collies, but we tend to be able to find more of what we're looking for in those two breeds.
So where are the main areas? I mean, are you at the airport? Are you at ports? Where do you send your
dogs? At the moment, the dogs that we have are at Tamba. We're starting to train other dogs for other areas.
Because I mean, ideally, all the ports also, I mean, should have dogs smelling the border control areas. I suppose in an ideal world you would have dogs.
You would have, and customs are involved, as well as the South African Police Services. This is just to assist them more than anything else, because there was a gap, and with the Endangered Wildlife Trust, they saw that there was a need for these dogs, so they approached us. They actually saw one of my handlers at the airport, and that's how they approached us, and asked us if we can form a joint venture, which we did, and then I sourced the dogs for them. The dogs were paid for by their sponsor, and then Bidvest came on board with a large sponsorship, and that's how the unit started.
Great, go for it, Bidvest. We've got to acknowledge all these companies that do great things. So Warwick, what happens? Do you just have a dog smelling all the boxes, all the suitcases? How does it work?
The handlers go out every day to do what they train to do with their dogs, and we have now 4 dogs working for the EWT, and the handlers know what to look for: paperwork, strange airway bills, that type of thing. We also look at certain flights because it's impossible to screen everything.
Right.
Definitely. So we do try and look at intelligence information that we can gather from the Hawks or customs, anything like that. If we can find something, then we use that and target that. Or if the guys come into the warehouse and say, well, that's something unusual, let's try that. And that's how we work.
And what does the dog do when he or she suspects that there's something there?
If
how do you know, in other words?
They will indicate.
What are they barking? What do they do?
Well, the first dog that came in, which was Rico, he's become a bit of a celebrity.
Oh, has he?
Been all over the newspaper, on TV. So I'll pick on Rico. He barks, and he gets really, really excited. And the reason for the barking is because he was trained as a human rescue dog, so he was trained to bark.
Attract attention.
Yeah. And when he came out, he had this bark, so we didn't stop it, we just used it. So he gets really, really excited, and he tells the whole world if he's found something.
So give us some success stories. So what has Rico found?
I will let you in on one, because some of them, they're still, it's...
investigating or whatever, okay.
So, but Rico's first indication. We went to one of the clients, and the guy said there's something going on, possibly. Let's have a look. So I brought Rico, and it was his first, literally, day on the job. And we went through with him. I actually handled him, but we don't like to know where it is, or because if the handler has an idea, they help the dog.
Okay.
So I went in completely blind, worked with him, and eventually he made the indication. And once he'd decided this was it, he made an indication. We all got excited, and we brought the customs in, and there were 3 rhino horn in. But what was quite amazing was how they packed it. And
how they packed it?
With bubble wrap and newspaper, black plastic bags. The whole box was shrink wrapped, but seriously shrink wrapped, which was unusual.
And you could still pick up the scent?
Well, we normally cut the plastic on the outside.
Okay.
And we like the shrink wrapping because it keeps the scent there.
Okay.
So we just cut the plastic, and they'd also put mothballs inside.
Again, to
try and
hide
and
them.
he still made the indication.
Fantastic. So describe how you felt. I mean, he was barking with absolute delight, and you must have been delighted.
Absolutely.
On a lot of levels.
A lot of levels. A lot of pressure on us to make the system work. Plus, with the investment that had gone into this whole thing, to get the first success on the first day, literally, was quite incredible.
Well, you mentioned that you're working with 4 dogs.
Yes.
And that you're working at OR Timber.
Yes.
So, I said, we should have more. So, and if you've had quite a bit of success just with 4 dogs, it just makes one wonder if you had so many more, and if you were looking at all the border controls and all of those areas, just how many more tusks and ivory horns we could stop from leaving. And then if we could prevent that, I wonder what kind of effect that would have on the poaching.
Well, Customs is doing a fantastic job now. They are looking at training 500 dogs, and a lot of those 500 dogs are going to be put out at the border posts, and a lot of them will be for endangered wildlife. So that is great news.
That is great news.
Yeah.
So when Rico made his discovery, how do you reward him?
We train a little differently, because mostly when people use search dogs, they train the dog with the ball, and his ball is the reward. We take it one step further. Because of the explosive dogs, we use the same technique. We can't have false indications. So we take it one step further, and him actually finding that rhino horn is his reward.
Okay.
So that's what they're looking for. After that, we give them a ball just to actually break, acknowledge that he was correct. But while they're searching, you can actually swing that ball around. They're not interested.
It's a ball?
Yeah.
A ball, okay.
He's not interested. As soon as he finds what he's looking for, that's all he's interested in.
So what are you doing as the handler? I mean, you mentioned that you don't want to know beforehand. Are you just looking at where he's moving, tail signals, and are you then moving him in a direction?
We train them to actually watch our hands.
Okay.
So when we train them, we teach them to smell on the seams or anything like that. So generally we leave the dog. So it's a partnership between the handler and the dog. Each handler knows what the dog likes and doesn't like. And if he's missed something, we bring him back and let him search the area again. We keep them on lead because of the traffic inside the warehouses. And that's how we do it. So we work with the dog. We give them a little bit of freedom in expressing themselves, if you want to call it that. And then if they miss anything, then we just get the handler to help the spots where the dog is missed.
So, Warwick, how long have you been working with these dogs, sniffing out for rhino horn? And
it's just over 2 years now.
Over 2 years.
Yeah.
And you've had quite a few success stories.
We've had some success, yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
The latest information that we have, which was passed on to the EWT from the Hawks as well as Customs, is they're not finding horn anymore, which is great news for us. It means that it is working.
Okay, so they're finding another way of getting it out.
Absolutely, and we've got ideas which we're working on.
Wow, okay, so when you hear me talk about the numbers increasing and it just feels like this battle, and then you heard Karen say that it's probably going to get worse before it gets better, I mean, how do you feel? Do you? I mean, you're part of the fight. You're actively fighting.
The big thing is, we were talking earlier on that the government is actually tweeting as well. That's great news, because it has to come from the highest authority. At the moment, there is the private sector and private individuals, which are putting a lot of time and effort into it. The government is putting time and effort into it, but it needs to be coordinated, and there is no silver bullet to this. We just got to make our efforts bigger, and it's not just here in South Africa. The education of your Vietnamese and your China on the horn itself, and that it has no value.
Warwick, thank you. Thank you very much for coming on to the show and telling us about Ricky, and we wish you lots of success. We're supporting you every step of the way, so thank you. Thanks, Warwick. I came across, Tara, an article about Chinese celebrity power. We were talking about all these people that you reached with this Twitter campaign. And this is obviously in a bid to cut the Asian demand for the rhino horn. And there's this Chinese-American actress, Bai Ling. And she was touring South Africa. She was going along and visiting the game reserves as part of an awareness campaign. And I think it's such a clever approach, because it's all very well having the celebrities in South Africa doing whatever they can, and I think it's fantastic that they're putting their celebrity power behind this. But to have Asian celebrities, Vietnamese celebrities, Chinese celebrities who are standing up and speaking out against that, I think there's the key there. So the Twitter campaign really it's just got to keep running.
That's right, yeah. I mean, obviously, I think it's often been said the campaign to save rhinos is not going to be won in South Africa. It's a global fight, and it's got to be in Asia where the markets are. But yeah, I mean, WWF, Vietnam and China and many of the other Asian countries, WWF India, were really fantastic in helping us drive the campaign. But yeah, I mean, it's got a very, very long way to go, until we actually save the species. But what I'm for rhinos, I've become like a rhino activist almost overnight because of this campaign. I just and what it's really taught me is that you can make a difference if you just put your mind in, and it doesn't take that much effort to stand up and be counted. And there's power in the collective. If we all pressure our governments to do more about this, we can actually save the species. And it would be a terrible indictment on humanity if we weren't able to do it. It's a completely solvable.
Agreed. Absolutely, it is solvable.
It's complex,
it's there.
and it's nasty, and it's dangerous, but it's completely solvable. I actually read a stat that gave me even more hope. Apparently, in the late 1800s in South Africa, there were only 50 rhinos left. They had almost been shot to extinction by hunting.
Really?
And we've now got 20,000 odd. And obviously it's very scary when you're losing 1,000 a year. It can't go on for too much longer.
But it can change. It can turn.
But look, we got a population of 20,000 from 50 rhinos. We can do it again. We just have to keep focusing on this and standing together in it.
Well, there's so many fantastic campaigns. I mean, your campaign, the Twitter world responded, and it's global, and it's this kind of cyber communication and march, really. But something a little bit closer to home, because people are doing all sorts of things. There's been this race, this bicycle race, and it's called Race the Rhino. And I know that it was up here in Gauteng. I think it was by Harties, and I think that it's moved down to Cape Town, because there's this vegetation called Renosterveld, which I'd never ever heard of. So, and that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to preserve it, because it really is endangered, and also trying to bring the back rhinos back to that area. And this is an area which is rich in soil, so we've got wonderful wines being developed in the areas, but it's at the expense of this very important vegetation, which we think is very important. So this is just another area of it. And I have Justin Baxter on the line to tell us a little bit more about it. Justin, hi and welcome.
Yes, well, good afternoon, and listeners. We have something very unique happening this weekend.
Yes, Ride the Rhino.
Yeah, Ride the Rhino. It's the annual West Coast ride from Langebaan to Darling, then finishing in the Tygerberg in Durban. It is a wonderful event, the fourth year taking place, because spring is showcasing itself. So what I'm telling the listeners is there is a habitat, part of the Cape Floral Kingdom, called Renosterveld, completely different to Fynbos, and there's only 4% left of this, endemic to South Africa, and also one of the most threatened habitats we have. So it is a part of the global hotspots.
So, Justin, is that why you have the rhino in that area? Because is that where the Renosterveld is?
Yes, Renosterveld got its name from the black rhino being here and feeding off the bush. Famous, obviously, because of not having large trees, and then Strandveld, very close to the beach. So those three habitats make up our Cape Floral Kingdom. We are also the only country in the world to have a kingdom to itself, and we never really claim that as South Africans. But we have this dilemma that most people don't know about it, and in it you'll find little species like the Cape dwarf chameleon, the geometric tortoise, aristeers, and even the first koi word in Afrikaans, kukamakranka, that you'd find in the Renosterveld realm.
Well, that's something to be very proud of.
It is. I think we as South Africans should claim the high ground, because these species that I mentioned now are more threatened than the rhino at present. But being a flagship species, and also English people happen to say Renosterveld, so it's commonly now known as Ride the Rhino. So we have used the rhinoceros in as a pioneer. So once we can create more habitat, we'll have the ability to bring black rhinos back into the Western Cape where they once belonged.
Am I right, Justin, that that's the area where there are a lot of wine farms now? That's where a lot of Renosterveld was.
Darling has a wonderful wine farm, Tigerberg as well. But now there's little fragments of the original habitat there. Mm-hmm. So in essence, wheat and wine has replaced this monocultures, has replaced this diverse habitat. Just to give you an idea, there's more than 1,400 endemics, where the UK will have 51 endemics, plants that you find nowhere else in the world.
Wow.
And they showcase themselves. These plants and flowers are out because it's spring on the west, beautiful. So we put together all these little fragments in a 300-kilometer track, and we do this over 3 days.
So everyone gets to see them in full bloom, in their true glory, really.
Yes. We'll start tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, down Hunting Street, and then move through the West Coast National Park, then on to Eysterfontein along the coast, and then into Darling. We spend 2 nights there, and we finish right in the heart of the Tigerberg wine valley at the farm of Burndal.
And how have the wine farmers responded to people taking their bicycles and riding through their land?
Well, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be able to go through, so they've given us the right as landowners to use the track. And then we've got a wonderful sponsor on board as well. It's a South African corporate by the name of Resolution Health and Zuriel, and they've come to the party by endorsing this. They're also the only one that you get fitness points through Zuriel for doing this trip. And bear in mind that it's holiday time, so it's also family orientated.
So your dream is to bring the black rhino back to that area?
Yes, for sure. We've already got white rhinos on one of those farms at Bloemfontein, but the actual browsers, the black rhinos, the black rhino was recorded on Signal Hill in 1668, just to give you an idea.
1668, okay.
Yes,
wow.
But the beauty of this race is that there's a real Resolution Red Racing Rhinos. On Sunday, we'd only race in South Africa that the whole race departs in these red rhino tops. And we've also got those rhino horns, and it looks like the Second World War memorial. So we'll take that picture where we have 668 rhino horns lined up, and then for each rhino that was poached, we have a rider in the race with the red.
Listen,
That's
it sounds,
wonderful.
it sounds, I mean, visually it must be very, very powerful, and also with the vegetation and people riding in that beautiful area. Well, I must say, Justin, I mean, as you said, it's the second year and it's already growing, and may it grow and grow and grow, and perhaps more and more of these wine farmers set aside more land to reintroduce the black rhino, and then hopefully a whole lot of tourism, and that would be beneficial to everyone.
Well, thank you for the opportunity of speaking to listeners and to informing them that the Resolution Health Rhino Ride is an annual event, always in the spring. And for those that are interested in next year's race, the entry is open on the 4th of December.
Thank you, Justin.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Justin Baxter, can you imagine going on a mountain bike now in that beautiful area with one of those red rhino horns, which symbolizes one of the rhinos that were poached last year, and riding through that area and that vegetation? And it just makes me think about, the scary fact, really, and that is that we're just growing. The population is growing. We're expanding. We're bursting at the seams. And as we do that, we're putting so much pressure on the natural habitat of animals. I don't know if you heard about a hyena walking the streets of Johannesburg. Did you hear that story, Tara? I even saw a picture. Someone took a picture, and not far from my house, I'll have you know, my kids are too terrified to go to the park. But, you know, if you just think about the fact that you have these hyena from the Constantia Kloof area, and, you know, now they're coming in because we as human beings are expanding all the time. So these black rhinos who originated, and they were there happily, and now we have wonderful wine farms and we enjoy the wine. It's an ever-increasing issue, isn't it? It's, I suppose, finding a balance. So, Tara, great success. It continues. How do you ride this wave of success? How do you keep the momentum going? How do you keep the conversation going?
Yeah, look, I think people already are. And I hope, Justin, I hope you're still listening, Justin. If you are, please tag some of your pictures this weekend with hashtag I'm for Rhinos.
Oh, great idea.
I think people have rallied to the cause. I mean, even before this campaign, they were already passionate. And yeah, we've got to keep it going. And I mean, to be honest, to a degree, the success of the campaign caught us a little bit by surprise. We were aiming very ambitiously, and we were aiming for this really big number, but we didn't realize with what passion and intensity people would respond. So I think now WWF's got to think quickly and carefully about how to continue that. And yesterday I heard Jenny Cruz Williams talking about, I can't wait for next year. And I think we've got to do it next year. It was devised as a once-off campaign, but it seems that we've created a brand on Twitter. We've created something that people respond to, and we should continue to use it if we can. I think anything in the fight against rhino poaching is you know, any tool is valuable. So yeah, we've got to think about it. In the meantime, please, everybody, keep using that hashtag and keep visiting that website and using your it's www.imforrhinos.com, and continue to use your power, the voice that you have, to speak out about this issue, because that is how we are going to get the governments to put more money into programs like Warwick's and other programs that actually stop this. You know, we South Africans, maybe just as a species, we're great at kind of standing by and shrugging our shoulders and saying, oh well, you know, I can't do much about that. Yeah. But actually we can, and if we stand up and talk out, that is the first step in changing society for the good, and in saving these species. So yeah,
Karen was saying it's one rhino at a time, one day at a time.
One day at a time, yeah. And it would be such a dreadful indictment on South Africans if we weren't able to stop this purge. I mean, what would it say about us? I think we South Africans have an incredible power to stand together when it really counts. We've seen it so often. I mean, not least in our own creation of democracy, which is, you know, 20 years next year. I think it's what a great symbol of our own democracy to say we can stand up and actually fight something like this together. And yeah, you know, the previous campaign that Flo was involved in was the Vote for Table Mountain campaign, the campaign that got the Table Mountain declared as one of the new 7 wonders of nature.
Right.
And that was equally, well, it was also very exhilarating and exciting and quite surprising. I mean, when we started out, we were up against the Grand Canyon and the Great Barrier Reef, and we didn't think that we had a chance for Table Mountain, you know. And South Africans really rallied to the call. They were just incredible. I mean, it ended with Bishop Tutu standing on a rock on top of Table Mountain with his arms outstretched and saying, "This is my mountain." And South Africans responded in their thousands. And we got millions of votes for that campaign. And I think when, you know, we often do come late to things, whether it's our tax returns or it's our Christmas shopping or whatever it is. We're often a bit late off the mark, but when we get going, we really get going. And I really hope for rhinos and for South Africa that we can take what has started here as the beginning of the end to extinction. We hope this is going to be the end with all these different approaches and initiatives that we can
We
try
do.
together
We-
to stop
Well,
rhino extinction.
as I read in the beginning, there's so many organizations, there's so many people, there's so many things that are happening. It's just staying connected and feeling it all the time. And as you said, being proud and being passionate and standing up against it.
And having the courage,
The courage, right.
It's a little bit of courage.
And realizing that as an individual, we do have a power.
Exactly.
We can
Especially
do
when
it.
we come together. Especially when we come together.
Indeed. Tara, thank you. Thank you so much for telling us more about the campaign, and look forward to supporting it in a year's time.
Pleasure. Well, now, go
Take
keep
the Stephen
the
Fries of this
conversation-
world and let them do more.
Keep
Come
the
on.
conversation going.
Absolutely.
Please do
Thank
keep tweeting. I'm for rhinos.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Warwick. Thank you very much. And thank you for tuning in, for listening, hearing the stories, hearing the success stories, also on Twitter, and realizing that it is a very important conversation. We must never be silent. We must never be desensitized or numb ourselves to these things that are happening. So whether you're getting on a bike and going down to Cape Town and riding in the Renosterveld and hoping that the black rhino returns, or being a part of training dogs, or giving money, or standing up, or just tweeting, you're doing something. Remain vigilant. So I thank you very, very much, and I hope that you will tune in same time next week. Remember to visit the website for any suggestions or to listen to the podcast. That's Conversations with Niki, one word. From me, Niki Seberini. Take care. Look after yourself. Goodbye.
Hi, my name is S.V. Trendler, and I'm the HOD of IT Integration at Bridwin Preparatory School in Melrose. We started using study apps about 6 months ago and have seen astonishing results. We were quite amazed to see how quickly the kids have been able to use study apps and the benefits it has shown with regards to reinforcing what they've already learned inside the classroom. I would highly recommend study apps for any school.
Studyapps.co.za. Conversations with Niki was brought to you by Studyapps.co.za, South Africa's leading education app for tablets.